Live. That's right. It is Orange and Blue today, presented by Champ Honda, Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason, and this is it. Make no mistake who you are, Andrew Mason. This is it. It's draft week, baby. I'm over the moon. I'm dressed up, right? I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I'm saving the getting dressed up for Friday or Saturday. Although I don't know that I'm going to be terribly dressed up. This might be the I'm thinking not the very modern nice sport coat, but then some kind of interesting T-shirt underneath,
Right,
right?
right.
Something a little goofy, like an old minor league baseball logo or something like
Or
that.
I have a Prestige Worldwide t-shirt. I should
Yeah.
wear that, right? On like Friday. Prestige Worldwide because we want the Broncos to hit platinum with their picks in the third round.
Yes. As Phil Hartman playing Frank Sinatra on SNL many years ago said, "Swing, baby, you platinum."
No, I'm
Uh,
thinking of you and me on a boat recording a music video. Orange and Blue today. That's right.
oh
It
my
is.
gosh.
OBT is a BFD, and we are here for you during draft week. Now, during draft week, we're also talking about NFL news, in addition to the Denver Broncos news, which we'll get to in just a little bit. But the entire NFL world, everybody's talking about the Aaron Rodgers deal. Finally done, I guess, kind of done. Is it done? It's done? It's done, right?
It's done.
Okay, so we know what the Jets are giving up for Aaron Rodgers. It's not that much. I was just on the drive with Derek Wolf and D-Mac, and Derek was like, this makes the Broncos look terrible because of the Russell Wilson trade. And obviously, fans, that's what they're talking about. Why did the Broncos give up that much when the Jets didn't have to give up as much for Aaron Rodgers?
Well, first of all, start with the fact that Aaron Rodgers last year, coming off a season where it looked like age was hitting him square in the face, whereas Russell Wilson, it wasn't a great year in 2021 and he dealt with some injuries. It was still a year where he had a pass rating over 100 and he's younger than Aaron Rodgers is. So part of it with Aaron Rodgers is you have the short time span in his career that he probably has left. And so, what are you paying for, especially coming off a year where it looked like, okay, maybe this is the real decline? Whereas with Russell Wilson, you didn't have that. You had a younger quarterback who presumably should have given you several years of good play based on where he was at that point. You can see Aaron Rodgers approaching the cliff. You really couldn't see Russell Wilson approaching the cliff unless you really dove in and were looking for that specifically. So these are two different quarterbacks, different stages of their careers. Now that being said, if the Broncos had traded for Aaron Rodgers a year earlier when he was coming off back-to-back MVPs, even though he was still an Asian quarterback, the back-to-back MVPs immediately preceding the trade would have meant a very hefty deal. Quite frankly, the Packers cost themselves an awful lot by waiting, and what did they get out of that? They missed the playoffs.
Right.
The Packers are the big losers here, I think, today.
Yeah, the Packers are, and, every year's different, and every trade is like a snowflake, Mace, where it's just going to be made up of different parts. I don't necessarily subscribe to the Broncos got screwed up. Like, just fix Russell Wilson or don't. So when the Jets make this move and everyone's losing their mind, I get it. I understand, especially in talk radio, right? Like, I understand what we're supposed to do, and it's part of the conversation. The fans are having this conversation right now. For me personally, just as a football guy, I'm like, fix Russell or don't fix him. But talking about last year and what could have happened, what, are you going to get something back from Seattle? Like, what are you going to do? I hate to use barnyard psychology like Dr. Phil, but how's that working out for you? You can't do anything about it. So we could sit here and complain all day that the Russell Wilson trade was bad, or we could say, what can you do to help Russell this year, get the most out of him, and then gladly pay him his contract in next season going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason why people are reacting is I think it was Albert Breer who had the tweet in the 2 o'clock hour where he said Jets owner Woody Johnson's concern in giving the Packers a first rounder in 24 was becoming next year's version of the Broncos because, of course, the first round pick that the Packers would get from the Jets depends on Aaron Rodgers playing 65% of the Jets' offensive snaps this year. Otherwise, it's a second-round pick that's conveyed to the Packers as part of the deal. And so, and look, that Russell Wilson deal, yes, it's going to inform and impact future quarterback deals. That's just how the game works. When the Broncos made that trade last year, how many people were saying, oh, it's a bad move, okay? I mean, we hear it a lot right now, but let's be intellectually honest here. Hardly anybody said it was a bad deal when it happened, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's part of what bothers me about the critiques of this and saying, oh, well, they shouldn't have made that. Yeah, you can play hindsight and say you shouldn't have made that deal. But at the time, that trade was pretty well universally lauded. Like, okay, you gave up a lot, but that's what you had to do to get a quarterback who had been stellar for the better part of 10 years and certainly didn't show signs of looking the way he did in 2022. I mean, and maybe you could say, all right, he wouldn't have an elite year for him, but he'd have a good year. Nobody saw him having not only the worst season of his career, but the worst season of his career by miles. I mean, you look at the arc of Russell Wilson over 11 NFL seasons, and 10 of them actually look pretty similar. And then you have last year that was the outlier. And again, That's why I often say on air, and I've said it with D-Mac and Derek Wolf on the drive a bunch of times, this year is about determining whether it was a decline or a dip. If it's a dip, he's going to bounce back working with Sean Payton. Everything's going to be fine and dandy like sour candy. If it's a decline, we're going to know right away, and we're going to be talking about whether the Broncos can move up for Caleb Williams or whether they give Jarrett Stidham a shot.
He is fine and dandy like sour candy. He is Andrew Mason. I'm Cecil Lammey. I'm fine like a box of wine. Mm-hmm. It's Orange and Blue today, presented by Sean Ponda. My final thought on the Russell Wilson, the deal, like, okay, fix him or don't. That's all I care about is the future. And let's be honest, as you said, Mace, there were people saying, what is Seattle doing? I can't believe the Broncos. Like, if you didn't know the Seattle stuff, like, at first you were thinking, whoa, how did the Broncos pull this off? And a year later, people are saying, what a bad deal. Like, no, let's not play revisionist history here.
Right. We were all saying, okay, what is Seattle doing? Like, Seattle has this terrific quarterback who's been the best at that position they've had in their history, and they're giving him up when it looks like he's still got something left in the tank, right? I mean, and they're going to ride Geno Smith and Drew Lock? Really? I mean, look, were a lot of us proven wrong last year? Absolutely. I mean, nobody knew that Russell Wilson was going to look like that. And I don't care what anybody says. Nobody except maybe Geno Smith himself thought that type of season was coming for Geno Smith. I mean, in the preseason, it was all, well, why didn't Drew Lock get the job, right? And now here we are a year later, Geno Smith's the clear starter, and Drew Lock got no interest whatsoever, and he just signed a contract to be Geno Smith's backup.
Right.
Presumably, maybe hoping someday he can have the Geno Smith arc where he gets another chance down the line, which maybe is part of the reason why he re-signed with the Seahawks, because Geno Smith, second-round pick, starter early in his career, flamed out, eventually got that shot.
Yeah, and it happens. You stick around long enough, you can make it happen. And Drew Lock could certainly be that next Geno Smith. The story's not done with Drew Lock. That's for sure. And, fine. I like when Geno Smith said, they wrote me off, but I didn't write him back. I thought that was good.
I have to admit, I wrote him off when he tweeted out that when it came to the flat earth thing, quote, I may be with Kyrie on this, unquote. And I'm like... If you seriously think the earth might be flat, you could not be my quarterback. I'm sorry. Because that's like failing. Because part of being quarterback is the intellect, right? And to me, if you're sitting there falling victim to flat earth tropes, that tells me that on the mental side, you probably can't lead my team. But what do I know? Because he went out there and had a terrific season last year. So, I mean, even if he does believe that the earth is flat, which, I mean, I've always said goes against so many things, including commerce, because if the world were flat, at the edge of it, it would be the biggest tourist attraction ever. It would make, you know, it would make Disney World and Las Vegas combined look like uh, look like Lyman, Colorado by comparison, right? If the world really were flat. So
Wow, the rare Lyman shout out here on Orange and Blue
I,
today.
I don't mean anything bad about Lyman. I'm just saying,
No.
like, for those who are watching out there on the Eastern Plains, I mean, I could have said Sterling. I could have just Hugo, Burlington. I could have just named anything.
Cause said Grover, right?
Yeah,
That's where
yeah.
I'm from. Yeah, that's I'll leave
Yeah.
it alone because we'll get off track. But like the
Yeah.
flat Earth thing, I can't figure that one out. Anyway,
I admit that bothered me. I'm like,
right.
really, dude? Come on,
Right.
man.
Holy Diver says for the draft you should wear cutoff T-shirt and sweatpants or sweatpants as shorts.
Okay, I like that. I'll show up over at Broncos headquarters on Friday and do that. I mean, I might be doing my conversation on Thursday wearing some sweats, kind of like I am right now, just because we'll be at home kind of waiting to see if the Broncos actually do make a pick, which we don't know. I doubt it, but I wouldn't rule it out. So anyway,
I wouldn't rule it out either. I put the chance at 10%. I'd probably take the under on that 10%, Mace. I'll assume you're around the same spot.
Yeah, I'd say probably about 5%. About
5%.
About,
But it's
about a
still
1 in 20.
possibility.
Yes, enough to where we're going to be on call on Thursday night. That's
Yes.
the thing. We are going
Yes.
to be, and we'll be watching the draft anyway. Although I gotta tell you, man, it's weird watching the draft when the team you cover isn't active that first night. It's very strange.
Yeah, it's interesting to say the least. I was in Radio City Music Hall, speaking of Derek Wolf, our dear friend, when the Broncos kept trading back. First time they trade back, I was like, they're going to get Doug Martin. I wanted Doug Martin, Levante David that year. And the Buccaneers got both of them, ironically. But they moved back once. I was like, it's Doug Martin. Then they moved back again. I was like, I have no idea. So, yeah, that was it. To be there at New York City. The Radio City Music Hall was different. I know the draft's a big deal, and it's much larger than it was in New York City. But, yeah, it was odd to be there all day, no pick.
Yeah, like you wait and wait, you build up, and then nothing happens. The funny thing on Doug Martin, though, is this. As good as Derek Wolf was for 8 seasons with the Broncos, you could make the case if they had stood pat after that first trade and selected Doug Martin, that the Broncos would have won a Super Bowl that year. And of course, because Willis McGahee was injured, and so
And then Noshawn gets injured.
right, and they were trying to run out the Ravens game in the divisional round. The late Ronnie Hillman, God rest his soul.
A fine effort. It was like 80 yards on 12
Right.
carries, something like that.
But he wasn't the guy that you wanted to plow into stack boxes and get a tough 3 or 4 yards and run out the clock, which is what the Broncos were trying to do to avoid giving the Ravens the ball back. And so if they stand pat and take Doug Martin, it's a weird what if. Broncos might have gotten that Super Bowl 3 years sooner. But then they might not have gotten the other one because they wouldn't have had Derek Wolf to partner with Malik Jackson. I mean, it's
Yeah.
you
And
go down
the games and the stunts that Derek Wolf played with Von Miller, I've always said Von owes some of his production to Derek Wolf.
Yes. He should. There should be a tithe involved with that, probably.
It is Orange and Blue today. Cecil Lammey, Andrew Mason, presented by Champ Honda. And the chat room is definitely fired up about our conversation today. Let's talk about the cornerback, and the interest, because we're seeing more mock drafts. People are doing more 7th rounders. Our friend Matt Miller and stuff from ESPN doing more mock drafts. Chad Ryder's always doing 7-round mock drafts for NFL.com. So we're seeing the process extended where the Broncos will be involved in these mock drafts from the more relevant draftniks out there that are doing these sorts of exercises. We're seeing a lot of cornerbacks, and we can get into the names if you'd like. And sometimes I'll see some names, I'm like, nah. But I do believe there is an interest in cornerback, Mace, but how much?
I think it's reasonable. Corner is one of those positions where I think you're always looking to add no matter what your situation is. And we've seen just from the Broncos in the last few years how they can go into a year feeling pretty good about their top three, but you're not going to be able to rely solely upon them. And I'm talking about your two outside corners plus your slot. Your CB4 is going to have to play at some point and play substantially, as is your backup slot. With all respect to K'Wan Williams, he's not injury prone to the degree that Bryce Callahan was, but
Right.
you can with K'Wan Williams bank on him probably missing between 3 and 5 games because of injury. So you're going to have to rely on your depth there, and this was the thing with cutting Ronald Darby. You wanted to make space, and I understand that completely, but I would have felt really good about that cornerback room depth-wise if you're talking about PS2, Damari Mathis, Ronald Darby, and then K'Wan Williams at the slot. You take Ronald Darby out, you sign Tremon Smith, who's there as much for special teams as he is for his role as a backup corner CB4 in that room. But I don't feel as good about the depth. And also, with Damari Mathis, this coaching staff may not feel for Damari Mathis what last year's meant, although it does probably hold some significance that Christian Parker is back as secondary coach and that the Broncos didn't look to free agency to upgrade. They basically said Damari is going to be one of our starters, and that's it, which tells you the esteem that Christian Parker has regarding Damari Mathis. But you still need to find somebody for depth, because if you have an injury to at the position, it's going to be hold tight, and it might get pretty ugly, because let's say you lose K'Wan Williams, you lose Damari Mathis. First of all, teams are just not going to throw at Pat Surtain. They're going to throw at everybody else. What do you have in reserve there? It's fair to question the depth.
Yeah, it's very fair to question the depth. I'm always looking for size and speed combinations. I won't say his name. Oh my God, if they got Julius Brents this year, they'd have to move up to get him, Mace. But I think both of us fell in love with him at the Senior Bowl. I love him so much. Emmanuel Forbes, I'm looking at my cornerback article at denversports.com. Forbes is a ball hawk. So when you get to day 3, essentially, of the draft, what I'm looking for, and the reason why I liked He Who Should Not Be Named, is you want rare traits. Like, okay, maybe they're not complete. Maybe they don't know what they're doing yet, but they have rare traits, whether that's a rare size, rare length, rare speed, or like Emmanuel Forbes, a Mississippi State kid, incredible ball hawk. I think it's 14 picks over the last 3 seasons. So for me, I'm just give me one of those things. But Julius Brents, that's a different conversation. The Kansas State corner, like if you move up to get him, oh my God, that would be so incredible for this team. I might do a dance of joy that would go viral.
But you might have to move up. You could stand pat and probably be in good position for Terrell Smith out of Minnesota, who flashed at the Shrine. You might even be able to trade down, but I would say not trade down far. I don't think Terrell Smith makes it to day 3. I think even though his workout wasn't very impressive, it's a trust the film case with Terrell Smith. I think he's going to sneak in there. So what you are looking as you get into day 3. Okay, what are some traits that eventually could translate? I mean, it goes back to Tariq Woolen. He had the speed trait, right? You loved him. Obviously, he needed a lot of work technically. To his credit, he figured things out much faster than I think even you, and you were a Tariq Woolen guy.
Yeah.
But
I wasn't going to say that,
Yeah, but nobody thought he was going to figure things out that quickly, but he did have the special trait of speed. As you're looking this year, you don't have anyone with that special speed trait who's getting into round 4, round 5, but you start looking at some guys that maybe have some length to them, that you're talking about 32, 33-inch arms, and they've got some size. Lance Boykin out of Coastal Carolina is somebody that I
Yes.
think you could get round 4, round 5, and he's got some length to him.
Like a
Darryl
Josh
Luke,
Norman, Coastal
yes,
Carolina, who, top of my
right.
head, was third, fourth. Where was Josh Norman? He was like fourth round, so there is some talent there.
I believe he was 4th round. So I'd look at Boykin and I'd look at Darryl Luter out of South Alabama. These are
Yes.
two guys coming out of the Sun Belt Conference who who are going to be pretty raw, but you start from the fact that they're long. Darryl Luter's also got huge hands as well. He's got 10 and 3 8-inch hands. He's basically got some catcher's mitts out there. The thing about him is his speed was just okay, 4.46, but also he's very thin. Like he's sub 190 pounds. You're gonna have to put some weight on that 6-foot frame, but you like the length that he has, and so that's where I think when you get into day 3. I don't think we're looking at the same type of speed that you might see from some years, but I think you're looking at some guys with some unique length for the position, and that attribute should translate.
Yeah, and I think there is, I'll say his name, a woolen bump for certain players this year that are a little bit longer. Kaylee Ringo, the kid from Georgia, the freak athlete, might be the fastest player of any position. He's not anywhere ready to set foot on the field in the NFL. Like incredibly raw at the position, but you know what he is? 6'2", and I think they clocked him at 23.5 miles an hour.
Yeah.
In some of his workouts. And if you know anything about miles per hour, for example, KJ Hamler, I believe, was running about 23 miles an hour. Tyreek Hill runs about 23 miles an hour. So Kaylee Ringo has no clue, like whatsoever, what he's doing. But my God, is he fast. And he's going to get drafted in the second round, dude. Yeah. Because of Tariq Woolen, not because of Ringo, but people are going to see what Woolen did because he's 6'4" or 4'2", didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah.
Ringo 6'2", 4'2", and doesn't know what he's doing.
And if we're looking for breadcrumbs from Sean Payton, what he said last week about a multi-year plan for guys and not necessarily picking the player who was the best right now, but kind of saying, all right, what do we have planned for them in year 2, year 3, and where can they go? And that being a priority. To me, that screams they're going to roll the dice on some raw, higher upside. You and I talked about small school, and I wouldn't say that Sun Belt Conference guys are small schools guys, but they're not Power 5 guys. I think they're going to roll the dice on some guys with traits who are coming from Group of 5, FCS, D2 at a bunch of positions, including cornerback, and see where they go. Me, I still like Terrell Smith better. I think he's ready to go right now, but yes. I can see the Broncos also looking at these higher upside guys into day 3 that have these physical attributes that we're talking about.
It is Orange and Blue today, presented by Sean Honda, Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason. With a few minutes left in today's program, we certainly appreciate everyone out there for watching. It's draft week. We're both over the moon. Mace, we finish out today's show with a conversation that, honestly, we could do the whole show on this. The CJ Stroud situation. Yeah. Now the reports saying, Houston not going to take him at 2, could pass even the Colts at 4, could last all the way to the Las Vegas Raiders. So is Stroud going to follow the Raiders? And why is it, Mace? And again, we can go as deep in this as you want, or we can go surface level if you want. Why is it every year we're dealing with something like this, whether it's Wonderlic test or the stupid Justin Fields thing where someone around that program was saying he would use his epilepsy to get out of practice, which was tremendously false. I mean, such a tremendous, and you had morons on ESPN that would run with it. Dan Orlovsky, I'm speaking of specifically. I know like Tyler'd always get mad at me because he's buddy with him. I'm like, yeah, you don't say that. You don't say that about these young men. And here it is, the month of lies. It's April. I love it. But damn it, Mace, every year somebody's lying about something. And here we go again with CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I mean, the social implications of this, I think, are ridiculous because we're starting to get it. You're getting into a discussion of, okay, this seems to happen every year with at least one quarterback prospect, right? Yes. Every year. And I noticed that it doesn't happen with the white guys, by and large. when we have these sorts of discussions, right? So there's that element to it, but I mean some of it I think is downright slanderous. I mean,
Very much
there
so.
was you had the it was put out, and of course they have the different cognition tests now that they give the quarterbacks, and it was put out the numbers for some of them, and in one of the stories about him citing the numbers that came out for CJ Stroud that were leaked on that, you had one unnamed executive there you go, right,
Anonymous scout.
saying CJ Stroud's quote going to be a bust, unquote. I mean, it's ridiculous. I think the thing that makes me angry is something like this happens every single year, right? You point to the Justin Fields thing with a couple of years ago, and I think that was slander then. I think this is slander as well against CJ Stroud. So I'll probably, if I kept going, I'll probably say some stuff that might get me in real trouble. But this is just something. It bothers me on a visceral level.
It bothers me on a human level because this is agent-fed information, obviously created to have a young man's stock fall. We're talking about potentially millions and millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. Also in that same article, and for shame, anyone who runs with this stuff, absolute for shame. But in the same article, it said, well, what Ohio State quarterback... Are we going to call Joe Burrow an Ohio State quarterback or not? And I think with the transfer portal, we need was there any Texas Tech quarterback that ever did anything until Pat Mahomes? Anyone? B.J. Simmons, Graham Harrell, Cliff Kingsbury himself. Was there ever any Red Raiders quarterback that was worth a damn, was worth a score to you-know-what in the NFL until Pat Mahomes, who's a bona fide superstar? So this whole helmet scout, what Ohio State, what Alabama quarterback, scout the damn player, find the right fit. And enough of this bogus BS that agents are spreading to make a young man's stock fall.
I'm glad you bring up the Texas Tech example. I think, by the way, the best one before Patrick Mahomes was Billy Joe Tolliver, a name that I know you're
right. Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, if you just helmet scout and say, okay, well, this is what that school has produced, you could make an all-time team of players who wouldn't have been drafted where they were and would have been ruled out because of the school that they went to, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Now, sometimes what we do see quarterbacks or players from any position you can go through that maybe are a bit better if they come from a place where there's a specific manner of coaching. But when we're talking about over the broad history of a school, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter at all. I mean, it's Ohio State's fault that Art Schlichter was an all-time bust because he had a gambling addiction, and somehow that's part of the history of Buckeyes quarterbacks. They should be used against these guys coming out now because, believe it or not, when they start talking about, Ohio State hasn't produced a quarterback, inevitably somebody does mention Schlichter, and that was 41 years ago. That means bupkis, and that means bupkis. Craig Krenzel, the fact that he didn't have much of an arm and got a couple of starts and that was it, that means bupkis. Okay, it does not matter. It doesn't matter at all. Actually, what should mean something, and we always say focus on what they do, not what they say, is that the Chicago Bears, after 2 years with Justin Fields and in a position where they could have taken any of these quarterbacks this year, said we're trading down. And we're riding with Justin Fields because we like what we've seen from him. And he's an Ohio State quarterback. That, if you're talking about a school, that should mean something.
Yep, things change pretty quickly in the NFL, yet there's still a good old boy network and some old school mentality that needs to change in a bad way. Orange and Blue Today, presented by Sean Pondy, is Andrew Mason. You follow him on Twitter, @MaceDenver. I'm at Cecil Lammey. Before we're out of here, do the YouTube things, like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid, 3:30 p.m. ish every day right here, denversports.com for all of our draft previews. He's Mace, I'm Cease, we're OBT, it's BFD. We love you guys. Until next time, be safe, be kind, know that you are appreciated. Stay tuned, and there's one other thing that I want you to do. It's called Stay Frosty.